our guest for the first part of this morning. She told investors to go in and continue buying stocks at the height of the financial crisis back in November 2008. And the MSCI Asia Pac Index is up almost 40% since her call. We have Lorraine Tan rejoining us on the program. She's the head of Asia Equity Research at Standard & Poor's. A good 2010 to you, Lorraine. Let's talk about your expectations for this year, shall we? Because we heard Mark Mobius there saying maybe corrections might be in store. How do you see things playing out for the next 12 months?
Well, I do think this. I mean, we're on the whole that what we're going to see this year is the markets move into basically the second year of a bull market, or the second year of the recovery as we've seen it from the bear market lows. I do agree with Mark Mobius is that we will see volatility come back, so I do expect to see some corrections along the way. 20% in some cases, but not necessarily, but maybe 10% certainly. On the whole, however, the second year is still going to be decent. Forward P's and valuations are not really too excessive, so therefore we do think that the markets have a chance of moving up another 10 to 20% this year by the end of the year. Yeah. Okay,
and Lorraine, let me just ask you, because we have Superman here in Hong Kong. Of course, that's Li Ka-shing weighing in on the markets as well. He says that it seems that stocks and stock prices have gone ahead of economic fundamentals. So there's a lot of risk and volatility in the markets. If someone said to you, Lorraine, should I be putting in money now? What would you say to them?
I think you'd have to be much more selective this year. I think you are at a level where we're no longer at the steep discounts that we saw at the same time last year. So certainly you're going to have to be more careful. Some stocks are in ranges that are well beyond fundamentals. So I think stock picking is going to be a lot more important. And I think what Li Ka-shing says is partly true. We've seen very good holiday sales in the States. Is a question going forward of whether that's going to be sustained from the U.S. We do expect very sluggish economic growth on the whole coming out of the U.S. for this year.
And since we brought up Li Ka-shing, let's talk about the big headline this morning, Lorraine. What did you think of this move by Hutchison Whampoa to buy back its telecom subsidiary, Hutchtel, even after selling it just a few years ago for cash?
Yeah, well, now I think what they've done is that Hutch Telecom obviously has been sitting on a bit of cash after selling off their Indian assets. So I think for Hutch now, are there other moves that they can make, other acquisitions out there? And I suppose from his viewpoint, strategically, it made more sense for Hutch to go ahead and privatize Hutchison Telecom or buy at least most of it if they can. And I think that's where they're at. They have access to cash. They can amalgamate the telco operations under one roof again. I suppose in that sense, if there weren't any other opportunities for Hutch Whampoa, I guess this was the best thing for them to do.
Okay, now Hutchison Whampoa is part of the Hang Seng Index, which you said in the past you expected to hit about 26,000 in 2010, which isn't that far off from where we are now. The 8 shares index, you expect to climb 6 to 16,000. Are you still sticking with these forecasts, Lorraine?
I am for now. I mean, it's been a choppy ride in China. The start of this year so far. But I think there's still a very strong domestic growth story coming out of there. And that's going to come back into favor, because if you're looking at slow U.S. growth, I think there's still going to be an interest in better domestic growth stories.
Okay, well, speaking of domestic growth stories, since we've been talking, it's been a few years now, you like these Chinese banks. Do you continue to like them into the year 2010? Because if you look at valuations, you're right, they're not too stretched for these big names like ICBC, CCB, and BOC. But again, we're looking at moderating loan growth for 2010. So what does this sector look like to you?
Actually, we like the banks in a number of places, not just China. But speaking of China, what we're seeing is basically loans growth coming back to about 16%, which would be normal for a 9% GDP growth that we're looking at. And I think what the moves that we've been seeing have been prudent, and we're quite happy to see more care, more caution be factored into the management of the banks. And I think with the underlying domestic growth, the valuations are still pretty undemanding, and I think that's going to underpin the performance of the banks. Overall, the environment for the banks as a whole is improving, and I think that has to provide for some support globally as well.
Okay, so and you said across the board you like these names: ICBC, CCB, Bank of Communications. Is there one that stands out more than the others?
Probably at this stage, our bank analyst Desmond Chung prefers China Construction Bank. I think he sees that one as on evaluation grounds and management-wise as well to be his favorite.
Okay, Lorraine, quickly, let me just try to squeeze this in before we get to commercial break. But, you know, we have a cold snap taking place in China at this point, and you're recommending these commodity plays. You know, with this cold snap and these weather conditions, I guess in the near term, do you see any stock being affected more than others?
Well, it always brings into concern, I mean, transportation costs going up, so that's going to hurt the electricity side. So that the utility side has been beaten down, so we'd be wary of continuation of coal costs going up without the electricity tariffs moving up. But you know, we are overweight the energy side. We still prefer that as a growth proxy for China.
So, Lorraine, what do you think of investors getting a little jittery here in China, thinking that the government is going to step in, and these are, you know, the first signs?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously, allowing the interest rates to rise was unexpected. I think a lot of people expected targeted tightening, which has been in line with normal policy, but to allow the rates to move at this part of the year was probably a bit earlier than expected. On the whole, we do think China is going to raise rates sometime during the course of this year. I think it's moving obviously from a loose stance to a more moderate stance, and that's a trend that we're probably going to expect to see for much of the region as a whole. So on the whole, I think we factored it in. Yeah.
Okay, you factored it in that there is going to be tightening taking place in China, but yet you still like the energy names, so I assume that you think consumption is probably going to overtake the decrease possibly coming in from tightening. And looking at some of these names that you like, they include Sinuk, also Yanzhou Coal and China Coal Energy. In fact, they are among the best performing 8 shares in 2010. Do you continue to favor these names going to 2010?
Yeah, at this stage, I mean, we're expecting as the global economy recovers, we're going to see excess capacity on an energy front be absorbed, and that's basically going to be the foundation to support oil prices and coal prices, for that matter, for much of this year. So, we're, on a valuation ground, the energy issues are still fairly comfortable. We do favor the upstream side. We do think that there might be some, margin pressures for the service providers still, and on the refining side as well. But we therefore think the upstream side's the way to go.
Yeah, you like those coal names, which is quite interesting because there's a lot of M&A expected for this year. You see them consolidating a bit, and there are reports saying that Yanzhou Coal in particular may be looking for overseas acquisitions. Do you think this will benefit the Chinese sector as a whole?
Yeah, I think so. I think for the case of Yanzhou Co., they really need to make the acquisitions to grow because they have limited excess capacity in China, to be honest. So if there is an opportunity for them, because they are cashed up, and as are some of their peers, to expand via acquisitions, and to get it at a reasonable price, they have a market for the coal in China. So I think therefore the growth prospects are still going to be there for them.
Okay, well, what about the growth prospects for telecom and telcos? They have been defensive plays, which do well, I guess, in volatile times, but underperforming in 2009, which was a year of recovery. What do you think for 2010? Still sectors to avoid?
Telco is kind of interesting because I think if there is a lift, we're kind of neutral on telco actually. If there is a lift that's going to come into play, it will be from the M&A front, and I think you're seeing that with the Hutch offer for Hutch Telecom, for example. So we do expect M&A play to actually lift this sector. But other than that, organically, it's probably not as exciting. I think growth is limited in a number of areas for the telco operators without the M&A opportunities.
Okay, and Lorraine, let me just quickly put this question to you. We got an email coming in from a viewer. This comes from John. He wants to know, what are your favorite 5 Asian markets for investors seeking Asian diversification using ETFs?
Right. Well, we still like the H shares. I mean, obviously, there's an H share ETF quoted in Hong Kong. For exposure to the A shares, there's also an A share ETF. I think those two we like. We also like Korea. We think Korea is our preferred exposure to a pickup in global export recovery. It's much more sensitive, obviously, to a pickup in exports, for example, and that's where we're expecting that growth to come from. On a more defensive side in ASEAN, we think Singapore and Malaysia stand a chance of doing well this year. Indonesia has been a top performer, and I think for a domestic story that's still in play for the near term. But as valuations move up, as risk goes up, I think Singapore and Malaysia could do quite well as well.
Okay, Lorraine, nice talking to you, and a good 2010. I'm sure we'll see you very soon. Thank you for that. Lorraine Tan of Standard & Poor's.